I would like to welcome you to ITSE 2309. Before we get into Chapter 1, I'd kind of like to lay out the premise for this course. This course is actually designed in two parts. There is a lecture component and there is a lab component. So these two items have a parallel process and then they intersect later on in the semester. The lecture chapters are on the theoretical side of database theories, and the lab is more on the programming side. And at the end of the semester, you will be given a problem where you will take the theory that you learned and the program that you learned and then solve a project. And there's a standardized format template that we use for these classes. There are 15 chapters in this book. All the chapters begin with the chapter objectives on what material will be covered. Then at the end of the chapter, there's a summary of the information that is going to be happening for the chapter. Now that is how the textbook is written. Now when you get to Blackboard and you're doing the information on Blackboard, we've kind of developed a template in Blackboard where we kind of have a read it, review it, and then a small practice type thing. And this is to try to give you the benefit of the information in the chapters. In a classroom setting, when I'm lecturing, or when the lecture is, the students get the information during the lecture process. When you're at home, there is no lecture component to that, so it's incumbent upon the student to read the chapter. So that's why we have those little review things at the end of the chapter. That is supposed to correlate to the lecture component of the class. Also, rule of thumb is that for every hour you are in the classroom, there's a certain amount of hours that you spend outside the classroom supporting the classroom work. Well, in the distant learning environment, that formula also applies. So please understand that it's going to take you a block of time. You know, I would figure no less than 10 hours per week dedicated to this class. I say that so you can budget your time as the semester goes along. Now, the PowerPoint slides that support all these chapters are on a bullet outline form, and they progress through the process. Now, one of the questions I'm always asked is, do I have to buy this textbook? Well, you can do whatever you want to do. However, everything that we put together for this class is premised on using the 10th edition Database Systems Design, Implementation, and Management textbook. Yes, there are some other editions out there. There are some older ones, and there is a lot of information. However, all the material that we have supporting this particular class is based off the 10th edition. It is your choice whether you would like to take some other. Now, I've also had issues with ebooks in that the textbooks are published at some time and the ebooks are kind of more contemporary. So every now and then, what I've seen when you use the hard paperback textbook and the ebooks, the ebook component may have more current figures and such that are not in the paper version. So just understand that if you go with the ebook scenario, sometimes the figures don't align because the texts were published 3 years ago or whatever, and now you're having current information. Now, in conjunction with this process, I would like to introduce 4 examples that I will rely on throughout this course. The first example is that of a doctor's office. Now, to give you an idea how this thing works, so in 1995, a doctor opened up an office in the middle of town. So then in the year 2000, they opened one on the south part of town. And then as time goes on, they opened one on the north side of town. And then, knowing that doctors like to golf a lot, they're out there and one of their golfing buddies says, you know, I've been doing this for a long time, I'm going to retire. So some of the golfing buddies get together and they're going to buy out this doctor. Okay, now the doctor is out in one of the suburbs, so in 2010, they're going to buy another system. Understanding that these doctors all built a system, so this all works together. They build it, they know it. They're going to buy this doctor out. Now when they buy this doctor out, well, yeah, it works, but is it compatible with the existing system? And we're going to look through that evolutionary process now. You know, in 1995, you had an 8-bit processor. Here you have a 16-bit processor. Here you have a 30-bit processor. And you have no idea what's going on over here. So that's some of the stuff that we have to go through. The other thing that we're going to look at is, how, so you're making $10 an hour and you work 40 hours a week, okay? Now these two systems, as they are interjected into the process, you could see how you can have $400 here. Now from this $400, you're going to subtract the FICA, you're going to subtract the insurance, and you're going to subtract the retirement. So you can see that you have to have a system that's going to manage all this. It's more than an accounting system, because what you have to consider is that there's a prior event, there's a current event, and there's a future event, which is different from just doing an accounting principle, because you got to warehouse all the data. And that's what we're going to take a look at. Going back to the doctor scenario for a minute, we're talking about how data works. So you would have the patient, you would have the spouse, you'd have child 1, child 2, and child 3. Now, as we're looking through this process, what you have to consider is that if this is the patient, this would be the primary item. There's going to be some identifier, a patient name, a patient account, something. There will be some ID to keep this patient or track this patient. Now, the spouse, because of the HIPAA laws, all this stuff has to be individualized. So it has to be compartmentalized, but they still have to be sharing some identifier. So you have a big piece of data, because all of this would actually be one unit, because there's going to be one bill that all these are going to be paid for. And you have the spouse would also have a unique ID, this would have a unique ID, this would have a unique ID, and this would have a unique ID. So what we've done here, we've taken a big piece of data and broken it down into smaller, more manageable pieces that yet have a connection string that we're going to deal with. The other example that we'll be using throughout the semester is that of a credit card. Now, for example, if you have a credit card, in the billing cycle of anything, when does the creditor or the credit company have to know my name and address? Actually, do they really need to know my name? No, because they can reference everything by account. Now, if they're going to mail me the bill, what they really have to know is my address, because that's how the mail's going to get to me. Now, every time I take a transaction, every time a transaction occurs with this credit card, do they need to know my name, my address, my location? The answer is no. There's only one time that they really need to know my name, my address, my location. That's one time a month when they're going to put my name and address on the bill to send it to me. Otherwise, that information is dead weight. Every time you make a transaction, you don't have to carry that dead weight because it's not really useful for that transaction. What you do need is the identifier, which would be like the account number. So what you do is you get a piece of data and you break it down in smaller, more manageable pieces. So they will compartmentalize my address scenario with a reference point with the account. And then once a month when they need it, they will call that information, put it on the envelope to mail me the bill. Now on top of that, do they need to get my name and do they need to get my name right on the envelope? No, because actually they have to get the address right, because otherwise they won't get to me. Now they can misspell my name and it'll still get to me. So there's some dependency issues between the data, in that there's a qualifying information on the data. And we're going to look at later on how a piece of data is dependent on another piece of data. and how sometimes you can break that data down. And then there's also a scenario in my first name and last name. So there's the first name, last name can be compartmentalized, the address can be compartmentalized, and at some point, you can break it down too many times, and then you have more problems because now you got more pieces of data to handle. So there's a break-even point where, yes, it's easier to manage data if you break it down, but there's a point of diminishing returns where if you break it too many places, then you have problems. The other example we will be dealing throughout the semester is that of an architect, and how when you go to have a house built, you sit down and there's the plans, there's the symbols, there's the diagrams, and all this kind of stuff that you have to put together. So the 4 items that we will be looking at will be the doctor's office, we will be looking at the credit card scenario, we will be looking at the department store scenario, and the architect. So those are the items. Now, let's get into Chapter 1. Chapter 1, like all the chapters, tend to be a kind of a survey concept. Chapter 1 speaks to data and information. Now, data information, so what? Okay, here's the deal. Okay, if I put this, what is that? Well, that's 76. Okay, 76 is data because it has no meaning to you at this time. Now, if I tell you that 76 is your current grade in this class, now the data becomes information. So now that is information. So you go data, information. Now, somewhere along the line, the idea is that information will lead to knowledge, and knowledge will lead to wisdom, in theory. That's the way it's supposed to go. So what we're going to look at this chapter is how you have a lot of data that has no meaning. It becomes information when it has meaning, and then that becomes knowledge, and that becomes wisdom. And what we also have to do is how to manage these events. So how do you develop a mechanism that will monitor the information, that will track the information, that will record the information? And if you go back to those doctor initials, the doctor offices, you can tell where, in the doctor scenario, if these guys have been open for 10 years, they got 10 years worth of business, okay? So they got 10 years worth of patients. Now, when you look up a patient, how would you look up a patient? Well, usually you would do like last name, first name, or date of birth, right? So what happens is that you collect information over time, okay? But as you collect information, you also have to organize it for easy retrieval. So this is what we're doing so you collect information over time. As you develop the database structure, you also have to implement an organizational format that you're going to collect information over time, but when you retrieve it, you have to retrieve it by last name or first name or by date of birth. So there's an organizational context. There's an indexing that has to happen. So we will look at how information is collected over time, but then when it is extracted, there has to be some identifier that is used to pull that out. And these are some of the areas that we're going to look into. So basically, Chapter 1 deals with how information is data and how you organize it in some kind of fashion for easier retrieval and management. And that concludes Chapter 1.